Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Experiments in AI. So we're now on to, video 9 of this exploration into Ollama and some of the models you can run and some of the things you can do in those models. So this video we're going to look at the creative writing aspects of the models and how you can do some interesting things with requests. So at the moment I've still got this one running because it's quite a complicated request, and we'll walk through it. It doesn't look super complicated, but just what it's trying to do is but one thing to know is the model's still running in memory. Here you can see I've just done a Ollama PS. And I'm using two models to do this, Gemma 3 and Llama 3.1. You can add as many models as you want to. As with most of the episodes, we've got a pull down function. Now, one thing I just want to clarify actually, which I hadn't really thought of before because I just assumed it and assumed that people probably knew. But, pulling a model is not the same as actually loading it when you run it. So when you pull a model, if I was to pull this model and do nothing else, the model would eventually show if I do an Ollama list. But if I do an Ollama PS, unless I've made a call to the model on some description in terms of like a chat, something like that, that actually has to load up the model to actually interact with it, that's when it loads up into Ollama in its memory, if you like, and stays there for 4 minutes. So it waits until it's finished being used, and then it waits another 4 minutes. And then if it doesn't get asked any more questions, it basically drops out of memory. And that's pertinent to what we're doing here, actually. Because what's going on here is, we're pulling down any models we don't have, but we have all these models, or I have them on my system. We're going to run the model, and this looks fairly straightforward in that we're just sending a prompt to chat, and the role of the prompt is user, so just a user interaction. And we're pulling back the content from that request. That chat request. But this time around what we're doing in this one, which I don't know if we've done before, is we're doing a story creation. So we have a starting sentence here. The old lighthouse keeper Silas squinted at the horizon where a storm was brewing faster than any he'd seen in his 70 years. That's our starting part of the story. I could have used it was a cold and stormy night. Something like that, I suppose. Two models we're going to test, so it's going to loop through these, iterate through. Just a feedback print here to just say, we're actually running the experiment, because sometimes these models will go away and spend quite a bit of time answering, and that can be a little disconcerting if you're running these and you don't know what's going on. This has now actually stopped running. I started this running before I started recording the video. So there's 3 parts to this. First bit is, and you can sort of see here, the starting sentence keeps getting put onto this story segment. Okay, we're just taking the starting sentence. So each time we have a story segment that introduces another part to it. So story segment equals the starting sentence. So that's our starting sentence there. So prompt number 1, story segment, continue this story. And it then runs that through the prompt, through the function, If we get a result back, which we should do, it then takes the response and adds it to the story segment, and then prints out just the continuation bit. And then prompt 2 is the story segment with now introduce a surprising plot twist. And then we get a response back for that, which is another they get a response back, which is then added to the story sentence. So each time we're sort of appending the result to the story segment each time. But when we're reporting back as this goes through, we're just showing on the screen initially like what came back as part of that continuation response. Then again, this increasingly large story segment now has describe size feeling in more detail after this twist added to it as a prompt. So we keep just adding on the responses to the end of the story. So the story's getting bigger and bigger. And then as we've done that, we're also just showing on the output, on the print, what that continuation piece was. And then at the very end, we just print the whole story segment, so you can just see that there's been no stuff omitted. Now, what's interesting about this is we're deliberately pushing everything together so we don't lose any of the story when we send it back to the prompt. So one interesting experiment you can try to see if there's like a continuation, because every time you request the model, you get that gap before it disappears from memory. So one interesting modification to try on this is to ditch the story segment previously and see if just asking a question from an already loaded model, which has had a previous question asked in that session, still produces the same answers. But for the purposes of this test, we're actually helping it by giving it everything it said before. But that's something interesting to play around with. So here's the answer or the story we get back. So you can see there's our starting sentence. There's our model, and we're using two models here. We're going to do one and then the other. So turn 1, continuation. So sort of continuation from the starting sentence. And if you remember, going back up here, we've got all that is just the story segment, which at this point is just the old line, housekeeper, Silas, blah, 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 that bit there. And it's been put in front of this, continue this story. So that's a sort of whole prompt, although it's not necessarily showing that here. So there's our continuation it's come up with. And then once that continuation finished, again we're just waiting for the model to do that, we then add in the plot twist, or the plot twist suggestion. So now introduce a surprising plot twist, and the story segment is now the initial prompt plus the continuation. It's been added to it. So go through, there's all the twist, and then the character feelings, which we're asking about that whole story so far. And then we just get, just to remind us, everything. So that's everything sort of brought together in one response, but without all those sort of prompts there. And then we do the same with Llama 3.1 or whatever models out you want to do. So same sort of principle. Continuation from the original for the first bit of the story. by, doing this, taking that first part of the story and then just saying continue the story, and we get this back. We then get the twist. Looks like we're getting slightly less back with this one. Then the character feelings. And then the full story segment, which might be a little bit shorter, I'm not sure. Then just observe how well each model maintains coherence throughout the story. Note if the models successfully follow the creative instructions. Compare the prose generally by different models. Which one produced more engaging creative writing? Consider how well the models remember the context from the previous turns. So at the moment, I'm assuming what's happening is because we're not getting above a contextual window. There might be a contextual window where when we're supplying all of this stuff as well, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I can't take all that in. But as I said, another experiment you could try by editing this and messing around with the code is, okay, try just asking the questions without the previous story segment, but ensuring, and it just does this anyway, it asks it after the first one responds, but doing it so that the model is still definitely running in memory, and seeing how that pans out. So there we have it. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.